Chris Sembroski, also known as Hanks, represented the Pillar of Generosity as a part of the crew of Inspiration 4 by serving as mission specialist on a 3-day mission to orbit. He grew up with a natural curiosity about outer space. He could be found stargazing late at night from the roof of his high school and launching high-powered model rockets deep into the Florida swamps in college. As a U.S. Space Camp counselor, and we're very proud of that, he conducted simulated space shuttle missions and supported STEM-based education designed to inspire young minds to explore those areas and define their passions. As a college student at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, Chris volunteered with ProSpace, a grassroots lobbying effort that promoted legislation in Washington, D.C. to help open up space travel and allow companies like SpaceX to exist. He then served in the U.S. Air Force, maintaining a fleet of Minuteman III intercontinental ballistic missiles and deploying for service in Iraq before leaving active duty in 2007. In his civilian career, he has sought innovative industry-disrupting methods to monitor and maintain mechanical equipment, reduce energy consumption, and to use data to drive preemptive action, making everything from data centers to hospitals to aerospace manufacturing facilities more efficient. Chris now works as an avionics testing engineer for Blue Origin's New Glenn program. This reusable rocket stands over 300 feet tall, making it nearly the size of the Apollo program's Saturn V vehicle. He resides outside Seattle, Washington with his wife and 2 young daughters, and I'm proud to say they're also now Space Camp alum. And Chris is also a part of our Space Camp Hall of Fame. I'd like to ask you to give a round of applause to Chris Sembroski.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me here with everybody today. I am excited to be here to talk to you about AI and space. So, well, to get started, I just wanted to start by saying I'm not sure what you expected for me to talk about this morning, so I'm hoping to surprise every single one of you anyway. So if you came in with certain expectations, well, I'm sorry to disappoint, but hopefully we'll do something completely different from what you were hoping. What I'm hoping to talk to you about is this convergence of how AI is evolving right now to where space in the commercial space sector were evolving about 20 years ago and how they continue to evolve today. But let me just start by saying every frontier that we explore carries with it the promise of innovation, the potential for discovery, and the opportunity to reshape our understanding of what's possible. And by that, let me say that one more time. Every frontier that we explore comes with it the promise of innovation, the potential for discovery, and the opportunity to reshape our understanding of what's possible. Now, I spent a significant amount of time in my undergrad getting involved with anything and everything related to space. At Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, I was close to Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center, and I got involved with model rockets, high-powered rockets. You can see Delta rockets, Atlas rockets, and space shuttle rockets launching all within a 2-hour drive from the campus. There was always someone at the table who could tell you the name and model of every plane that happened to be flying overhead just by the sound of it. And you could guarantee that somewhere, somebody was watching Top Gun in the dorms, blaring it, quoting it for the 500th time. But that's the environment I was in, and it was exciting. So one day, in that environment, somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, I got a crazy idea. Do you want to go to Congress and promote space to them as if we're lobbyists? And try to convince them that we need to open up space for more opportunities for people to go to space. Would you like to come?" Well, as a freshman, I knew absolutely nothing and had no idea how the world worked. I was bright-eyed, naive, and excited. And I wanted to start leaving my mark somehow. I wanted to make a moment for myself, but I didn't know how that was going to work out. So I decided Sure. Let's go ahead and leave Daytona Beach, Florida during spring break to go to cold Washington, D.C. before the cherry blossoms have started to bloom. And carpool with a few upperclassmen and try to wear a suit and tie after wearing shorts and t-shirt for the past 8 months. And talk to my representatives about space. I had exactly no idea what was going to happen, but I knew that the idea of promoting space and opening it up to the commercial sector seemed cool. I didn't know it at the time, but by the end of that first week, I knew finally that promoting space and commercial access to space for all Americans was going to be what I wanted to do and what I really believed in. So anything was possible, right? As college students, we're walking the halls of Congress's lobbyists of all things, and we thought that that was true. Anything is possible. With everyone that was there, that shared passion between the citizen lobbyists that were there, it was infectious. We all wanted to see bigger and better things happen in space. It didn't matter what political party each of us aspired to or what ideologies we came from. Space was something that brought all of us together because we knew the promise of innovation, the potential for discovery, and the opportunities that space represented. Fast forward 25 years later, and we can start to see some of those parallels that AI is showing all of us, showing us that same potential and that promise and layers of opportunity. However, we couldn't just get to here. There were some barriers to this. There were some pretty big ones. It may not be as big as we've seen with AI, but there were different types of barriers. In the late 1990s, NASA dominated low Earth orbit. If you wanted to go to space, you had to get with the space program, or you had to contract with one of the large aerospace suppliers like Boeing or Lockheed Martin, but still, those costs were prohibitive. Only the most valuable commercial communication satellites with profitable returns could afford their own expendable rocket. So this had to change. In order to drive that innovation and realize those opportunities that space provided, we had to figure out how to get cheaper access to space, and we had to make low Earth orbit a domain that companies could compete in. So to do this, that citizen lobbyist organization called ProSpace continued to hold annual blitzes on Capitol Hill every March. And I ended up leading and recruiting the student contingent from Embry-Riddle over the next few years. And my pitch was usually something along the lines of, hey, do you want to leave sunny Florida on your spring break to go walk miles and miles on hard marble floors and try to convince your representatives to pass the bills about space? Well, surprisingly enough, somehow it worked. And here I am with a couple fellow Embry-Riddle ice hockey teammates that I converted into lobbyists. We made a detour to MIT after our week at Washington, D.C., and I had a chance to follow. We were a bunch of aerospace engineers here, and we followed our passion and got to check out the Wright Brothers wind tunnel at MIT, which I'm sure going to Boston around St. Patrick's Day had nothing to do with my successful recruiting efforts. So before we have a couple more pictures here, here's a few more volunteers from ProSpace. That guy in the middle, his name is Kyle Hipchin. He's the best man at my wedding. He's a pretty key player in my adventures through space, and I'll come back to him a little bit later on. But this other picture here up in the corner is another picture from some of the people that were involved with ProSpace. This is actually a picture of the very first space roundtable that was held in 1999. And that was a small victory for all of us in this ProSpace lobbying organization because it brought us together with some key leaders that were important and realized the importance of space. The two folks on the right-hand side, you have Senator Bob Graham, and then Mark Schlather. He was a key individual and friend of mine who led ProSpace for a couple of years. So that organization, joined by people from all over the country, including a smaller contingent from Harvard, which I was not shy about pointing out to them, we successfully lobbied Congress for the passage of a few significant bills, including the Commercial Space Act of 1998, and that's legislation that required NASA to seek commercial supply missions to the International Space Station when the industry could allow it. So it was one of those basic bills that provided that legal framework for companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin just a couple years later to start forming feasible business plans, knowing that there would be a demand for their services and that they would not have to compete with the excessive resources that were made available for the space shuttle program. I know some of these things I'm saying sound controversial, and they did sound controversial at the time too. In fact, it took a few more years to convince a lot of folks on the Capitol Hill that we were doing the right thing, that we were talking about actual programs that were going to make space and the realization of what we hope space could be to come to a real, true reality. Now, when I think about what's happening right now with AI, we hear some of the same conversations. It needs to be taken into consideration that that same framework that we built up for space, we need to have those conversations for AI. It's going to take leadership to make the world and how AI interacts with the world the place that we need it to be. And whatever we want AI to be for us in the future, we'll need to ensure that the regulations are there to support those goals. And it'll take passionate people like we had going to Washington, D.C., and those individuals with a strong vision who are willing to share those ideas with our government leaders to inform them of the future we can have, and thereby securing the proper legislative support that we need to make sure that we can do everything that we're hoping we can do. Moving forward, the commercial space industry started experimenting in earnest, taking big gambles and on new and untested technology. Those gambles started to pay off. In 2005, White Knight flew to the edge of space and won the Ansari X Prize, taking our first couple of astronauts, commercial astronauts, to the edge of space and back safely. In 2010, SpaceX launched a Falcon 1 successfully on their fourth attempt, putting its payload into orbit and using a completely commercial vehicle. That was the first time ever that had been accomplished. In 2015, Blue Origin launched New Shepard and successfully landed in the West Texas desert. And we now had a strong case that it was hard to dismiss, saying that we are going to be using reusable vehicles and that they are truly a viable option. Space would no longer be dominated by just those rockets that were expected to be thrown away after every mission. The technological innovation was taking place, and it continued to evolve. Brilliant and motivated people saw opportunity. What was thought to be science fiction was becoming fact. We're hearing story after story this week of the experiments taking place with AI. We're seeing AI help us make sense of our place in the universe and giving us clearer images of the black holes. Microsoft and the Global Health Drug Discovery Institute just this last month in January reported that they're using AI to identify and develop medicines in months versus what it used to be years. My wife is using AI in her classroom as an English language arts teacher, and by default, so am I as her assistant to the teacher, which happens when you're a spouse to a teacher. But we're using it to help provide useful and timely feedback to students on their essays in a fraction of the time. And it's incredible how important that is when you have like over 100, 130 students as a middle school teacher, and you want to be able to touch each student's paper and give it a thorough review, and it's been actually very helpful to us. And then from the planetarium show last night, we found out that we needed a psychedelic image of the Mars showing the autonomous helicopter from the MASH TV series. Well, so that was kind of cool to see. So those of you that were in the planetarium last night probably remember what I'm talking about. So, okay, I will say, okay, not everything AI produces is winning and not always a viable product, but as you can see here, that is also especially true in space. But that's okay. There is joy and there's discovery and learning in the messy stuff. This was Starship SN number 10 that had a test flight earlier in March of 2021, and 30 days later, a day after the Inspiration 4 crew was announced saying we're going to send, what's it doing? Just 30 days later, when we announced the Inspiration 4 crew who was going to ride with SpaceX, they also launched Starship number 11 on an exciting test that also happened to meet a similar end as the four of us were driving out to Kennedy Space Center to tell everybody that, yes, we're going to fly confidently with SpaceX. But is it worth it? Is it worth it fighting every day for a vision of the future? Are the risks too great? Well, I hope you don't mind if I answer that question by telling you a story about a certain Super Bowl commercial. And I think it's going to play for me here just a second. If you haven't seen this, has everybody seen, who has not heard about this Super Bowl commercial? I'm curious. Or so you haven't, perfect, awesome. So there was a certain commercial that aired in February of 2021 during the Super Bowl, and it caught my attention.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
This fall.
Buffering, yes.
Inspiration 4 launches as the first all-civilian mission to space. And you could be on board.
Up above the world so
Visit inspiration4.com for your chance to go to space.
So it caught my attention, as it may have caught some of your attention with seeing that, oh my goodness, I can go to this website. The website still exists, by the way, and you're happy to, I invite you to go check it out, especially if you're interested in helping support St. Jude. But it caught my attention, and the next thing I know, a month later, I got a very interesting Zoom call with a guy named Jared Isaacman, who is the commander for Inspiration 4, and will also be the commander for the Polaris Dawn mission coming up this year. He's on the far left side of the screen. And he managed to convince me that this wasn't a joke, but he is actually going to pick me up 3 days later and take me down to UCLA for medical testing. And we're going to start practicing with SpaceX to get ready to go to space. I then had to go upstairs and tell my wife something that I had never thought I was going to have to tell anyone, that I'm going to take a ride on a rocket and go into outer space. That was quite the conversation. We had not expected any of that to have happened. But the importance to this conversation is that what I want to share with you is that there is an importance to laying that groundwork now so that things like this can be possible. And in our mission, what was really neat for me to see is that technological development that had been happening over the last 2 decades since we were talking to Congress, or when my days in Congress talking to them as a college student, that technological development really changed the level of the spacecraft that we had to fly. No longer did I have hundreds and hundreds of rocket switches to memorize. We were all doing things through touchscreens and computer-generated algorithms and machine learning to make sure we flew safely together. And to that end, we had to go through some additional testing. And here we're at the NASTAR Training Center. I know, Robin, you're familiar with them. And they're, I think, are they still partnering with us here at Space Camp? That's fantastic. And we're working on projects, partnering with them. They helped us get used to what it was going to feel like experiencing high levels of G-forces in their centrifuge in a simulated environment of a spacecraft. And a very low fidelity, but what was important is that you got to hear the sounds and you got to feel what it was going to be like during launch and reentry, and potentially in an off-phenomenal scenario when you had to escape from the rocket in case there was a problem. So that was pretty cool and very exciting to be a part of. The struggles are there, the struggles are real. I mean, if you have to climb a mountain with 4 weeks notice in the snow in April and then sleep out for 2 nights on top of a volcano like this, where just during the normal course of the day, as you're hiking, ice starts to stick to your edges of your hat and form on your hair, and you start to look like the abominable snowman. It's not an easy thing to do. It was probably the hardest hike I had ever taken. Probably the hardest hike, all of us except Jared. He likes to do this for lunch. And so, but the three others of us were doing everything we could to show that we were committed to this idea of going to space together. And so we took that hike up Mount Rainier to show that we are going to be a good team together and that we're going to struggle through these things and knowing that the goal at the end is worth it. Along the way, we're building up our crew mentality. We're flying in some of the fighter jets that had been part of the Black Diamond jet team that are now part of the Ghost Squadron that's launching this year. So it's very exciting. If you like to go tour air shows this year, be sure to check out Sun and Fun or Oshkosh. Keep an eye out for the Ghost Squadron for when they're coming through town, because it's an exciting group. A lot of the same pilots that helped fly us over Pad 39A with a rocket on the pad will be participating in that. And this next slide might look a little familiar. I know this suit, I like it a lot. I'm glad that you guys get the chance to see it here. It's an amazing feat to realize that the technology has developed in a way and people have shown dedication to building suits in a way that are specific and lower cost to the mission that they're trying to accomplish. And they've made them look kind of cool too. I'm just saying. But anyway, if you haven't had an opportunity, I want to share this with you as well, because there's a point to me sharing this video if you haven't had a chance to see the Inspiration 4 launch. I'm happy to, I would love to talk you through it a little bit if it's going to play. There it goes. All right, so I'll let them comment for a moment.
The crowd is super excited here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California, as we are now under 2.5 minutes until the launch of the Inspiration 4 crew.
What's really cool to me is that when the space shuttle was launching,
That crew there can be seen on the right-hand side of your screen, buckled in and ready to go.
it would take 8 hours to fuel the external tank, the big orange tank you see out here laying in the rocket park. It would take 8 hours, and so you had to drive up and load into a already loaded vehicle. They locked us in, shut the door, moved the crew access arm away before a single drop of fuel was loaded into the tanks of this vehicle, and they loaded the entire rocket
load complete
within 35 minutes, which is an incredible thing.
Stage 2 LOX load is
Dragon
complete.
is an auto idle.
But all the
Falcon is
modeling
now
they've done.
fully loaded with all of its
Gas
propellants.
closeout will begin shortly. Expect loud venting.
The modeling and the engineering that had gone into
Let
that.
the crew know that as we vent off various
Interrupting
lines
me.
on the launch pad, we'll hear some loud noises. Let the crew know that's planned.
It's incredible that
We're
we
also
can do
right
that.
now
That's just what
draining
I'm
the
just
liquid
gonna say.
oxygen
Let them talk, sorry.
out of the transporter erector, draining the lines, getting ready for launch. Waiting for the startup call at T-minus 1 minute.
You notice the lack of switches in the cockpit, right? In the spacecraft. All we see is a screen that Cyan, Dr. Proctor, and Jared, the commander, underneath.
You can hear the cheers. We're inside 1 minute.
Inspiration 4 is go for launch. Punch it, SpaceX.
Yeah, so in case you haven't figured out,
Commander, call it down.
well,
Punch it, SpaceX.
that's I'm in the seat in the far left. You got Dr. Proctor, Jared Isaacman, then Haley Arsenault, who is a physician's assistant at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital and also was treated there as a patient.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff. So thank you. Go Dragons. Go Falcons. Godspeed Inspiration 4.
Copy, 1 Alpha.
Vehicles pitching downrange. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Okay, I won't play through the whole launch, although I could keep watching it
30 seconds.
and keep watching it.
Call out,
We'll see if we can get to maybe first stage separation, and then I'll interrupt again a little bit.
We're into the throttle down, into the throttle bucket.
Stage 1, throttle down.
You know, I think I'll interrupt it there because
Throttling down in preparation.
there's you can go online and watch it again, or you can go watch the Netflix documentary. What I wanted to show out of that is that a lot of that effort that's gone into this has now been repeated over and over and over and over again. We're not throwing these rockets away. We're reusing them. We're getting that data back that we didn't get before. We're able to make improvements on every single launch, and the process that SpaceX goes through, and I know other launch providers go through, and my company Blue Origin goes through, is that we are looking at everything we possibly can to make the next launch and the next iteration better and safer. That's not possible if you do this and you just let it drown in the ocean and never to be recovered. If you're able to get this vehicle back, you can have that data that was recorded in higher fidelity than you would be able to radio it down to the ground. And so we get that data back and we can make the next vehicle safer. We can tell all the crazy stories about what happens when you get in space too for what went right, what went wrong, what could be better next time. But is it worth it? I mean, the goal that we have of getting more people this opportunity to see this view, I think, yeah, there's an impact to being able to take this view in with your own eyes. There's something more to seeing Earth from above the atmosphere than just seeing it in a picture or a video. It's very hard to translate over that type of media. I've seen it done a bit better job using VR, but it is not always the exact same. You're not getting that microgravity experience. We're working towards providing those higher fidelity experiences so that we can simulate what that is like. But man, we live in a really cool place, and I couldn't get enough of just, taking the camera out and through the cupola window and taking shots of places like Australia, taking images of the night sky across the U.S. Well, there's so much here. So instead of throwing this through an AI algorithm, I'm sure I can get somebody here to tell me the difference between the white and the yellow lights. So the yellow lights are coming from, it's okay, I forgot, cities, yeah. So anybody know what the white lights might be then? Lightning, fantastic. That's exactly right. And what's cool to me is that I think that picture was shot on an iPhone. So it's a quick image, but you can see that in one shot there are so many lightning strikes in that moment, emphasizing how dynamic of a place our planet is. And I can just imagine the amount of data that you could get from that to understand the environment and how things are changing. And I've got another slide here that's going to demonstrate that in a minute, but I get speechless when I look at pictures like this still. Thinking about that, we had that chance to see this, and you get this chance to see this, how cloud covered and blue and beautiful our Earth looks like in the daytime. Well, going back to those ideas I was talking about with technology, here's Jared in his commander seat looking at those screens. There aren't any switches. There are a couple of buttons. They're covered over in plexiglass saying, do not touch these. And we didn't, thankfully. But everything that we had to do was monitor just through those touch screens. Did we have to do any actions to actually orient our spacecraft or fly our spacecraft? We relied very heavily on the technology. In case of an anomaly or things were not going the way they needed to go, we could do things that would help control the craft, make adjustments, and fall into those contingency procedures. But for the most part, the vehicle is flying itself and doing a really great job of doing so. And so we didn't have to really concern ourselves about flying the vehicle during launch or re-entry. We just had to make sure that we were in a proper place, configured for flight in a very specific way. And then, of course, 3 days later, we splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean. To me, this looks like a bathtub because I've never seen the Atlantic Ocean this calm before. I was thankful for that, but yeah, you can see the speedboats running out to chase us. And there's a point to all of this, though, that I'm saying is that as we talk about the development of going to space and making it available to more people and developing the commercial space industry and talk about, is it worth it? Should we be spending these resources I think we need to have that same conversation for AI too. Should we be spending these resources? What is our goal? How can we tie this into the betterment for humanity? And I think one of the great things that Inspiration 4 was founded on was that we're going to tie this in to a greater cause than just sending some people to space. We're going to give back in an incredible way and help support St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, because I mean, if we can solve the ideas of going to space, we should be able to figure out how to solve childhood cancer along the way and earn that privilege to go to space. And so that continues today. And what was really cool to me about our mission is that you heard all that cheering in the background during the countdown, all the engineers that were really excited. I mean, you wave at the camera and all of a sudden the background noise is over erupting. And then I had forgotten as myself as how much I get invested in watching other humans go to space. And it's kind of humbling to think about how much everyone else seemed to be invested and tried to take this flight with us. And during the course of our flight, the donations started rolling in more and more towards St. Jude, not because you could get a patch out of it, that wasn't an option anymore, but because they want to be connected to the humanity that we represented on this flight. So many people started supporting, and we were able to not only meet our $200 million fundraising goal, but surpass it to the tune of $240 million, which I just think is absolutely phenomenal. And we need to think about having those same conversations like as we take advantage of this technology that we're developing for AI. I know as we think about all the possibilities and the data that we're getting back and the fun pictures we get from the images from Mars and the helicopter and all that stuff. And we get to play around and see somebody with 7 fingers in a weird contorted shape coming back from DALL-E. It's okay, because what we're going to be using it for, we have to have that vision to say, I know it's fun, I know it's entertaining, but as we go and develop this, how can we make it useful so that we're giving back and making humanity a better species overall? But it doesn't stop there. And we're not stopping with space. And I can only imagine where AI is going to be in the future as we start to see some of the really cool things that space has evolved into and is evolving into. Starship is launching again soon for the 3rd time to provide a vehicle that's the most powerful rocket ever to fly to the moon. And here, Blue Origin is building our own lunar lander that's going to take astronauts down to the surface of the moon to stay. Incredibly exciting times. We're not just going and leaving things behind. We're going to be using these things over again and taking astronauts back and forth. And then, of course, later today, Intuitive Machines is landing their first lander on the surface of the moon later this afternoon, which is amazing. This is the first time a commercial venture has launched their own lander to the lunar surface. I wish them luck. Hopefully we'll have some good news by the end of today for them. If you think about it, only governments have launched humans into space until SpaceX came along. Only governments have launched landers to the moon or to Mars until Intuitive Machines today. And what we've got planned for the future is just absolutely phenomenal. Just down the road, I don't know if you guys realize this, but there is one of the if not the largest rocket engine manufacturing facility here in Huntsville, Alabama, that's making these giant BE-4 engines that you see stacked up side by side. They're going into this beautiful New Glenn rocket. I'm sorry, it might be a shameless plug, but this happened last night, by the way. I work on the New Glenn vehicle in the avionics department, and seeing the rocket on the launch pad going fully vertical last night was just absolutely phenomenal. And this vehicle, oh my gosh, I've had people say, it looks so small. Guys, there's a big Saturn V standing up tall outside of this building out here. That's how big this thing is. It's a reusable rocket. And when you start to think about how incredible that is, we're living in a really amazing time, not just for space, but for technology and for humanity. We have all these opportunities coming forward towards us. I'm going to end my comments here shortly and take as many questions as I possibly can, because I end up expanding on those for a long time. I want to make sure I can answer anything that you have. But what I wanted to say that as we look at these represent the possibilities that we've been dreaming about for years. When we landed on the moon for the first time, you could see advertisements from Pan Am talking about reserve your ticket to go to our colony on the moon. Well, we're getting closer to that point now where we're actually seeing the stuff that we dreamt of become real, and some of it's being built here in Huntsville, and it's absolutely phenomenal. But let me just say again, emphasize these points. And if hopefully you saw some of this in the conversation that I was trying to relay to you today, that every frontier we explore comes with the promise of innovation, the potential for discovery, and the opportunity to reshape our understanding of what's possible. To me, this is a really, really good summation of where we are now with space and where we are now with this incredible AI technology. And I can't wait to see what else we get to come up with. I know there are a lot of really innovative minds in this audience, and I'm looking forward to see what you come up with, especially as we go into the next generation and the generation after that, remembering that we're not going to be the only ones that see our vision to fruition. We have to keep in mind that there are going to be others behind us that we have to keep inspiring to take up the mantle so that we can see people on Mars. We can see our vision for AI become a reality. And with that, thank you guys for listening to me talk and ramble on this morning. I really appreciate it. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have this morning as well, too.
You talked about when you were in the rocket, you realized that the rocket was flying itself. How did that make you feel?
Well, I get excited about that. A lot of people steer away from the idea of riding in an autonomous vehicle. Or I think what's incredible to me is that when you think about airliners today, there's so much put into all the autopilots that it's possible now that there are some aircraft that can fly themselves, land themselves, take off by themselves. They don't operate all that way for lots of different reasons. And I know I've got some amazing pilots in the audience who are going to correct me on some of these things. But that's okay. I don't hesitate at all. And the reason for that is because the foundation that we've seen with machine learning and AI and testing that's gone into a lot of these vehicles, being on a rocket that's been programmed to do what I need it to do, instead of me trying to control it, I prefer that. I mean, there's a reason for that. If you're flying at 8 kilometers per second, a human input is not fast enough to react to the conditions that you are experiencing to stay safe. And you need technology to make sure that what you're doing is safe and reliable, and it's going to bring you back home. That's an excellent question, though. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
How do you feel the competition is affecting the development and the progress? Do you feel like the different companies, I guess there's only a couple right now, are you competing against each other? Are you helping each other out? Yeah, so what's cool is that we are competing against each other, but at the same time, we're complementary to each other. And that's what's kind of neat about this. SpaceX makes no secret that their mission is to see people living and working on Mars. Well, Blue Origin is thinking about going to space to make Earth a better place that benefits all of us. So we talk about having millions of people living in space for the benefit of Earth, living and working in space for the benefit of Earth. And I think that's hugely important. I think that, yeah, there's going to be some things that we compete on initially. There are going to be some contracts that are given out by the government and the DoD saying we've got sensitive satellites that we want to put up in space. And so we're going to be competitors on those. But what's cool is that we're differentiating ourselves from each other. So there's not a one-size-fits-all vehicle, and we've proven that with the space shuttle, that is not the way you want to go. Like, the space shuttle is designed to be a one-size-fits-all vehicle that's going to take up astronauts. It's going to take up DoD satellites. It's going to take up commercial satellites. And it ended up doing all those jobs okay. And we want to make sure that we do we want to make sure that we develop our rockets in a way and our vehicles in a way
that fit the mission and that are able to do something that we specifically set out to do. And I think what's really cool is that SpaceX has their mission to satisfy their needs for their customers. In Blue Origin, we're designing our vehicles and designing our rockets in a way that's going to help meet our own customer demands. And they are different, and that's what's really cool about a lot of those things. Yeah, I'll stop there. I'm rambling on to another question. But yeah, I think, so in summary, yes, we're competing against each other, but we're also complementary. When I think about the airlines as well, if you only had one airline, you're not going to see a flourishing airline industry. But we have so many players and partners covering different parts of the world, using different types of aircraft for different types of cargo. It's the same thing that's developing in space.
Yeah, I had a question about your thoughts on AI and how to kind of reframe the conversation about how AI can benefit humanity. Because you talked about, you know, how with space, people sometimes focus on the cost, but really, you know, there are ways that humanity is benefited by space development and exploration and things like that. And obviously AI has a bit of a challenging reputation because of movies and TV where, you know, the AI is taking over the world and killing everybody, and we're all aware of the bad things that can be done with AI, and then of course the silly stuff like you talked about with the 7-fingered hand from DALL-E. What are some ways that we could, you know, kind of change the conversation a little bit and focus on how AI could be good for all of us?
Yeah, I think space has seen some of those same challenges. I mean, if I say the words thermal curtain failure, you kind of realize that space can have its own challenges that it faces from the media as well. A lot of ways that AI can be used. I mean, I'm thinking about the ways that I've been using AI in my job. It saves time and it increases our productivity when it comes to programming, getting the bulk of the scripting done, and it can help run testing on your Python scripting and help you get to a place where you can actually get what you want faster. I do understand what you're talking about when it says we've got all these things like, oh, Skynet's going to come take over. But what's really cool about AI is Microsoft came out with their article last month. And I'm looking for really incredible ways of using some of the data that is being collected to make flying safer, make space safer, and to help improve the human experience of interacting with vehicles like that. I think AI has that opportunity to be that incredible tool as long as we set the ground rules ahead of time and we create that framework that we're talking about. I mean, that's what we did lobbying Congress in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then people like Lori Garver came along and helped to really promote that idea that commercial space was the way to go, regardless of what the leaders at NASA thought at the time, including some of our well-respected NASA astronauts at the time. They said, what are you doing giving NASA's funding to a commercial company? How in the world are you ever going to look yourself in the mirror again? But it was a gamble that we knew would pay off, and we had to prove it to them. We had to prove it to folks that this is the way to go. This is the way that you're going to see an exponential growth. And so by setting that groundwork at the very beginning, having these conferences that we're having now so that we can have these conversations, talk about what do we need that message to be, and then taking that message and taking that passion. If you don't have that in front of Congress when you go to talk to them about this, they're not going to entertain you for more than 5 minutes, and their assistant's going to come and say, oh, the congressperson needs to speak with you, which, yeah, that happened a few times. But that's the nature of the game. You got to go and sell your ideas in a way that they want to listen, that people are going to grab hold of those ideas and lead them the direction you want them to go. And I think AI has that incredible potential. I really do. I've seen a lot of large data sets that I want to tell a story out of. I want to find what's the outcome from all these data points. And we've got great visualization tools. A lot of folks will say, oh, we're doing AI models. Well, 10 years ago when I was in the building controls industry and people were spouting off smart buildings and AI, really it's just they've got better programming or they've got machine learning. AI is going to take us to the next level once we have those large enough data sets so that it can start making its own inferences about things and coming up with new solutions. And we're seeing some of that start. And I'm looking forward to like some of these college students in here or the next generation of folks that are excited about this technology to really push it to the next level, get creative with it, and help us go a little bit farther to where we think we can go. Does that kind of answer your question? Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for your presentation. You mentioned earlier when you were in college, Embry-Riddle, going to Washington and being a part of the organization to really promote your views on space travel. Are there some specific suggestions that you would have for us today, whether it be part of an organization like the Planetary Society, or what are some things that we could do to inform our leaders, our Congress people, to that, we are interested in exploration and, we think that should be a priority to not only the region but the country?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. I really appreciate the opportunity to answer that question because I get excited talking about what we did and how that framework was laid. I talked earlier about making sure that we didn't address any partisan issues because once you start going down that path, you're dead in the water. You're not going to get anybody's attention. But what we ended up doing through ProSpace was setting a framework for what we all believed in, finding a shared passion. And the baseline was, okay, we need to find cheaper access to space. We want to open up access to space for as many Americans as possible. We say it that way because we're going to lobby the US Congress. We may want to open up space to as many people in the world as possible, but know your audience, right? So start there. Don't try to sell them on something that's going to send resources other places. And start with a group of core individuals that have a strong passion and be able to articulate that passion. Because you're going to get stuck in the nitty-gritty details. We started talking about, we wanted NASA to fund more projects that were part of like the Faster, Better, Cheaper initiative, to get small probes going out to Mars and other planets that they could do with off-the-shelf hardware and do it quickly and rapidly. We wanted them to invest more in doing a solar space-based power project and do a demonstration thing like that. And then there were other things that would come along here and there, but they all kind of depended on getting lower cost access to space. And so starting with a core foundation of what you really believe in is important, and then let those people that believe in that focus, that what we need to do, bring their own ideas. And why are they here? I mean, I was there because I really thought space should be opened up to as many people as possible, and I want to see us going out into space. Some people came to Congress wanting cheap access to space because they wanted to see vehicles developed that would help them visit their family members on the other side of the world a lot faster. They're getting up in age and they don't want to spend 24 hours on a connecting flight to connecting flight. It'd be great if they can go point to point in 2 hours or something like that. So what happens is when you go to Congress, you gather your groups of individuals together. Don't give them a big presentation. Give them the headlines and say, this is exactly what I need you to do. Here's something I want you to support. If you have legislation that's been vetted, give them that and say, please consider co-sponsoring this. Don't go to them and saying, space is important or AI is important. We want you to love it. This is what we're going to be doing in the future. They're just going to sit it there and realize, okay, you're selling me on something. This is 10 minutes into the conversation. I still don't know what I need to do. So give them an action and run with it. And those are, so summarize that up a little bit. Like gather the passion. When you get stuck on something, go back to that passion and so that they can see it when you communicate to them. And then give them very specific items to accomplish so they can feel like they're winning for their constituencies. Yep. Great question. I mean, you're striking a keynote with me trying to figure out how I can talk more about that, because you can see the passion coming out. This is how I get excited. This is what we get excited about. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing some more of the conversations today where somebody comes up on stage and starts talking about what they've been doing in AI, or I know, Fox, you're talking about immersive experiences this afternoon, and I know talking with you, I get excited about your passion that comes out, and it makes me want to go promote and support things that you're passionate about. So it has an effect. Going over there.
So you talked about hiking up Mount Rainier with the rest of the Inspiration 4 crew. How did that challenge you, and how have you used those challenges for your betterment since then?
So climbing up a mountain isn't just to say I've reached the top of the mountain, because that was just the beginning. That was to say that we could form a crew that's going to stick through it, that's not going to give up on each other, and that we're going to push through uncomfortable times and be comfortable in those scenarios. The analogy of going to the analogy of climbing a mountain in that way and going to space is probably the best analogy and metaphor you could possibly have, because going to space turned out to be very much like mountaineering. You don't need as much stuff up there with you as you think you might, so take stuff out of your backpack. You're going to be in pain sometimes because it's a unique circumstance. Know where the Advil is. It's all right. Better living through chemistry is okay in those extreme environments. And really, how I've taken that with me is that I also would highly recommend to Jared to give his crew more than 4 weeks' notice before doing something that people take 6 months to train for. But the idea is just, I've taken that thought that I'm more willing to say yes to crazy and outlandish ideas when I can see the goal at the end is important and valuable. I know that I'm going to be uncomfortable, I might hurt a little bit, but man, the rewards are going to pay off. And they paid off in a big way at the top of the mountain. And not that day, definitely not that day. We were socked in clouds, you couldn't see anything, and it was cold. That evening, though, when the clouds parted and you came out of your tent and you could look up and see millions of stars in the sky from 10,000 feet, was just breathtaking. The next day, you could see multiple volcanoes there that you can see from the top of Mount Rainier, from Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens, Mount Adams. Couldn't see Mount Baker because that was on the other side of Mount Rainier from where we were. That was breathtaking. We took the opportunity to go explore a little bit more, did some rope work going down to ice crevasses, using some ice picks to climb some ice walls. It was absolutely phenomenal. The reward pays off. If you can have that vision, stick with it, knowing that the goal is going to be worth the struggles along the way. And that I've carried with me. That I've carried with me into my job a lot. Building a brand new rocket the size of the Saturn V is not easy. And there are bumps and there are bruises along the way. I jokingly say to my coworkers sometimes, okay, when your forehead starts to feel a little flattened from banging against the brick wall too many times, come talk to me. Let's go look at some of these pictures of Earth. Let's go talk about why you're doing this, because that vision and that goal that you're putting all your time, blood, sweat, and tears into is worth it. Great question. Thank you for that.
AI missing in terms of regulations and like things that space gained through the process that you're talking about?
Yeah, so there are some things that you have seen develop. I mean, knowing the way the speed of technology develops, Congress lags behind, right? And we know this. And there tends to be regulations put in place rapidly, and when regulations tend to get excuse me a second. When regulations get put in rapidly, they tend to be put in haphazardly. And then internationally, you start to see a mismatch of different things. There's a reason why every time you click on a website, there's a pop-up that says, do you accept all these cookies? It's not necessarily a US regulation. And there's a reason why there's always an unsubscribe button at the bottom of all these emails you get. GDPR in Europe has mandated that you're able to opt out of a lot of things. And to be internationally compliant for a lot of things, I'm not the expert on all those regulations at the moment for the internet and technology around AI, but I do know that an international group needs to come together to make sure that we standardize around the world. And that has happened in space before. Like, we know that there's an international agreement that says Chris didn't need to have his passport current to go to space. I did not know that until I asked the question. Turns out that's because the regulations exist that says, okay, wherever your country of origin is from, wherever you launch from, the international community has agreed to make sure you get back to that country that you launched from. And so things like that come together and need to be agreed upon as to say, okay, what do we want to do with AI? We started talking, the FCC recently came out with the rules that you cannot be a telemarketer using a voice of AI because it's the fake and the chance to manipulate someone's voice and convince someone that you're not who you really are is too great. And the way you can use that for evil is not good. So I think the biggest thing that can come, that's missing with it right now with AI, is that international agreement on how we're going to start regulating things should things go to a point where we need to step in. And I think there's some risks and some challenges there, and I'm not the expert on those right now, but I will say that I think just having that group come together, setting that foundation that there is at least a recognized body that everyone can go to, as there is for a lot of other organizations, and there might be. If you know what that is, feel free to inform me. I'd be happy to hear about it. But making sure that people are aware of that international body, of what group is going to help decide the answers for when conflicts arise. And I think that's probably a good place to start. Also, a lot of times you'll see legislation get passed out of fear, and you want to make sure that that passion comes forward and people know what you're trying to accomplish before they regulate unnecessarily. So that's hugely important. And there's a lot of stuff that we did with ProSpace. It was just trying to promote the ideas that, yeah, we know NASA is really cool. Commercial space might seem scary, but it's not really all that scary, guys. Don't squish it. Don't squish it, and don't tell us not to do things yet. They're still talking about, do we need to start regulating what astronauts and spaceflight participants experience on board a vehicle? And the FAA has put us in a learning phase for the past 10 years, or at least 8 years, to say we're not going to regulate that right now. Right now we'll just regulate the safety of the people on the ground and everybody who flies in a spacecraft. Good luck to you, but at least you'll sign a waiver saying that you understand the risks, that the FAA is not responsible for you. We're responsible for the people that you could crash into, that you say you will not do that. So, okay. But just like in the airline, the questions are coming in space. And do we want to start answering them? Are we at a place where we can start saying that, yeah, we want to start regulating the interior of a spacecraft and the astronaut experience the same way that we do for airline passengers? We're not there yet. And I'm going to let the folks in the government relations department handle that, so I won't talk too far and step over them at the Blue Origin. So, see, we have another question here.
So what ways can students be studying if they are looking to go into like cybersecurity or like the space or like engineering fields? Like what can they study in AI specifically?
In building New Glenn at Blue Origin, we've got a lot of great engineers, right? I mean, you would expect that. What I constantly seem to need more of are people with incredible programming experience. So if you're into cyber, if you're into programming, and you want to get involved in space, that is a surefire way to ensure that you're going to have a place to go. I think if you can leverage tools like AI to become a programmer, to help look for vulnerabilities in systems that way, that's going to be hugely valuable to people, hugely valuable to companies like Blue Origin and other launch providers that are trying to make sure that the vehicles that we're building are safe today and safer tomorrow and safer next year than that. And that the next time that we go to do something, we can deploy it more rapidly and more quickly. I would, if you're very much interested in studying one career field in college, like your mind is set on studying physics, or you want to go do astronomy, or you know that you want to be a civil engineer, or you know that you want to study something in business relations, I still highly recommend getting something that some computer science classes, and getting, or maybe even a minor in it, just to stay on the forefront and get the idea of what it feels like to go through some of that programming. And that those are skills I see very valuable, that I always see a need to have more of in my line of work. So it doesn't take too much effort to understand how programming is put together, but once you get the general idea, then you don't have to know the ins and outs of everything. That's kind of why we have AI sometimes. You can use it to check your syntax. But I think what you can do is get that general feel so that you can speak to the folks that can help you build a better product. And then you can communicate better to the folks that are going to be on your team to help you build that successful mission. That's a great question. That's really important.
You mentioned briefly that you use AI in your day-to-day job and work. Can you give me a little bit more details on how you use it? Thank you.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, my wife is a middle school teacher, and so therefore I'm by default assistant to the teacher. So I use that a lot in helping her, writing prompts to get the outputs that we want, and to get the feedback that we need to give to the students. There's a lot of work that can be done and you had these conversations the other night talking about AI doesn't know everything that we want to know, right? It only knows what we give it. And I spend a lot of time creating prompts and writing prompts to say, these are the questions I have, here's the input I want to give into this, here's the context I want to have the output related in, what you got? And I am always surprised sometimes at the answers I get. But in my day-to-day job, I'll use it to give me a start on a Python script or in programming. I'll use it to say, okay, well, what libraries do I need to pull in? How can I start giving myself the framework to really solve this problem? I'm a person an engineer that I always do better when there's something on the page to start with that I can then move things around and then modernize or put more details into or optimize that way. A lot of folks, including, I know for me, it's hard to start with a blank sheet. And AI gives me that opportunity to start with something that I can launch from. No pun intended, sorry. But it gives me an opportunity to start with something that I can then evaluate and get myself in the mindset of thinking, this is the direction I need to go. This is the thought that I maybe didn't think of before. And it puts me one step ahead of where I would have been had I not used AI as that tool. But I want to say thank you for letting me give you this little presentation this morning. It may not have been exactly what you were expecting, like I said, but if I can leave you with anything, it's those last things that we've got this incredible opportunity to realize what AI can do and what space can do right now. Anytime we go into these new frontiers, they provide that opportunity and they provide that promise, and now we just need to go out and realize it and do it without abandon. And thank you guys so much for your time this morning, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.